PDR fund.
I'd like to call the July 10th meeting of Williamsburg City Council to order. Ms. Walton, would you call the roll, please?
Here.
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 Here. Here.
First order of business today is council minutes from the meetings of June 9th and June 12th, 2014.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the approval of the minutes of June 9th and June 12th.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Our next order of business is matters of special privilege, and we have two today. The first is in excellence in service to Williamsburg, presented to Administrative Assistant Tammy Rojak. Tammy, would you meet me at the podium? Bunch of things here for you. Tammy, this is a special award, as you know, because this comes from your peers. That you be recognized for your outstanding service to the city of Williamsburg, and I can attest to many things about you as being a neighbor, that you're a terrific neighbor and also a terrific member of this community. First, I'd like to read the proclamation, and then we have an award for you. You can put on your wall in your office or at home, and then if you'd like to say a few words. Okay? This is, the city of Williamsburg takes pleasure in recognizing Tammy Rojak for excellence in service to Williamsburg. Tammy Rojak has served the citizens of Williamsburg for 18 years with enthusiasm and professionalism as the administrative assistant for the Public Works Department. She is on the front line daily helping with a range of public services offered by the department, including refuse and recycling collections, street and sidewalk maintenance, cemetery operations, and water and sewer service, to name a few. Tammy is the face and voice of the city's environmental sustainability efforts. She was recently featured in the Williamsburg Next Door Neighbors magazine for her efforts to make the city of Williamsburg a more sustainable and livable place. She diligently promotes environmental awareness in water conservation, stormwater management, and litter control. She often hosts educational booths at the farmers market and at special events on the peninsula to heighten awareness about the breadth of activities and projects that make the historic Triangle a model green community. Tammy is known for maintaining a consistently pleasant disposition even under the most trying circumstances. She is well respected and appreciated by her peers and in the community. Tammy Rojak is hereby recognized with pleasure for her dedication to excellence in keeping with the best traditions of public service in the city of Williamsburg, and that's dated today, July 10th, 2014, and signed by me and Jack Tuttle. Tammy.
Just like to say thank you for this award. It really means a lot to me. I enjoy my job, and I am very blessed to work for the city of Williamsburg. I do have to thank Dan Clayton for hiring me many years ago, for believing in me. I still remember 2 very grueling interviews, but I made it through. And it's not just about me, it's a team effort. It's everybody in this room, and I'm just very privileged to be a part of this team. Thank you.
Our second matter of special privilege is a water plant award. Today we have Dixon Tucker from the Virginia Department of Health. He is here to present the award to the city for the water filter plant performance. Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for being here.
Quickly, let me say what this award is about and for. As you know, the water plant purifies the water and delivers it to everybody. However, we have regulatory standards, and then we have goals to obtain. They're to stretch for and to help protect public health. They include clarification, filtration, and backwash. In 2013, the Williamsburg water plant met all of those goals, and so for 2013, they have the Gold Award.
Thank you very much. This is Public Works Day, so Dan, this is really for you and your people, and please give our congratulations to the water plant team, because they really do a lot. So why don't I just hand this to you right now? Thank you. Next order of business is public hearings. We have none today, is that correct? That's correct. That brings us to reports. First is the monthly financial statements. Jack, anything in particular?
I think we'll wait until the city manager's report that the finance director will be given on the year-end status of finances.
Monthly department operating reports. Anything in particular?
Well, just one thing to point out. Well, a couple of things in the monthly operating reports. This report, of course, is at the end of the 12 months, so it's a good point to compare on the hundreds of measures that are in here, where we were after 12 months at the same time last year and where we are today. Just a few things kind of jump out. We see that our real estate transfers, transactions are up from the prior year. That's always a good sign. We see that city employee turnover continues to be very low. We've actually dropped again down to 4.5% for the year. We expect that will change in the next few years where retirement's coming up, but for now it remains very low. Historically, it had been more in the 8 to 9% range. Permits, another indication, we're over 1,500 permits issued for the year compared to just over 1,300 the prior year. Again, that's another sign of building activity and the economy coming up. Number of city businesses, though, actually showing a few less than the same time last year. We're right now at 790 at year end. Fire responses, fire incidences actually were down on the year. That's a good thing, to 84 from 114 the prior year. EMS response is almost level, however. Another one that I keep an eye on is in human services, food stamp cases. They were up just slightly, but Medicaid cases were down. So we're finally seeing some leveling in what has been a number of years of rather aggressive growth in those numbers. We continue to see growth in our e-government transactions. We're up to over 6,400 every year. And in the police department, calls for service are up nearly 800, and correspondingly, response time has gone up a little bit from 2.4 minutes to 2.67 minutes. The parking garage is continuing to see additional activity. We've seen growth in revenues, up to over 90,000 vehicles use the garage over the past year. Reservoir continues to remain high. All of these years of considerable rainfall have paid off in being a reservoir which is full to overflowing. We know that won't always be the case, but we're in that type of time now. Another area, the last one I'll point out, is that in recreation, all of those numbers are pretty substantially. At Waller Mill, Quarter Path, all the different programming, certainly the farmers market, we've seen a good deal of increased use and those services, and revenues up to go along with them. So there are many, many more here. I'll stop with that, but hope you'll take the time to look through those.
Thank you, Jack. Any questions at this point?
May I ask
Yes,
a couple?
please.
Mr. Tuttle, since oftentimes the police are involved as first to arrive on the scene in an EMS situation, is that considered an EMS call, or that the police happen to be responding to, or is that counted?
No, it would be counted in both. If the
Okay.
police respond and EMS responds, they're going to be captured in both systems.
So there's about an average of 100 calls for service per day to the police department.
Yeah.
And a response time 2.67 minutes sounds pretty quick to me. Is there a threshold that,
Sure.
a benchmark we really shoot for there?
I forget exactly what we shoot for as a target, but it's in that range. It's in that 2.5 to 3 minute range, which is good. I mean, that's a fairly rapid response for police calls to service. Of course, it's an average.
Right.
So some calls, police may be right nearby and they're there within less than a minute, and others take longer. But so I think we're satisfied with that as a level of performance.
To somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience with it, it sounds like a very good response time, and not with an extensive force either. So
It's comforting, I guess, to see those numbers. Any other questions? Thanks. Next are city manager reports. The first is the year-end financial report.
Mr. Sarah.
Mayor Hallman, members of council, we just completed fiscal year 2014 last week. We're going to recap the financial operations of the year, looking at the revenue and expenditure trends. Kind of on a cash basis, I'll report where we ended up for the general fund and on the sales tax fund, talk about additional accruals that we'll have to take into consideration, and then come up with an estimated general fund reserve level. This is the graph that you've seen many, many times. It's in Mr. Tuttle's budget message. We're going to talk about this area right here. This is the gap between expenditures and revenues this fiscal year. That's pretty much what this presentation is going to focus on. Okay. On a cash basis, we ended up at $32.9 million in cash collections. About $274,000 under budget for the operating revenues. Of course, this is a cash basis. We will be adjusting for that, accruals for that. So we'll have some sales tax for education money coming in, utility taxes and others. So I'm estimating somewhere around $340,000 additional revenue coming in, and we'll accrue that over the next 45 days. Okay. And on the expenditure side, out of 33.3 budgeted, 33.3 million budgeted. We came in just right under $32 million, so about $1.3 million under budget on the expenditure side. Again, this is on a cash basis. Okay, and then we're going to have to accrue some of these items. We know we have a jail bill coming in for June, and other operating costs somewhere around $350,000 for the year. So we'll be conservatively estimating about $450,000 more expenditures for the year. And looking at the actual operations, the expenditures on a different level with these categories, salaries and benefits, operating and capital. These are the savings that we came up with on that side. So on the salary and benefits, there's an open position in the fire department. That's why there's some salary and benefit savings over there. By the way, that position's being advertised right now and will soon be filled. There was some retirements in the street department, and there was some turnover in the police department also. So there was some salary and benefit savings for the year. And on the operating side, the operations themselves, the operating line items, where the majority of the savings is, right, the $569,000. A lot of that's about $100,000 of public assistance that they didn't need for the subsidy for this year. Recreation, police, and fire also had operational line item savings. And then a little bit of money saved in capital accounts for the fire, streets, and recreation departments. Taking it all in consideration here for the operating fund, the revenues plus the accruals would be about $33.26 million compared to estimated expenditures of $32.4 million after accruals. Somewhere around $823,000 would be a conservative estimate on the surplus for the operating fund for fiscal year 2014. As a percentage of the operating revenues for the year, it would be about 2.5%. So this is typical of what we've had the last 4 years. And then getting on to the sales tax fund, which is the capital improvement fund. Pretty much we've taken in all the revenues we're going to for the year. We will do some accruals, but there's going to be money coming in and out. But it will end up about $4.2 million on the local 1%, which is the majority of that revenue for that fund. A little bit of interest earnings, grants and proffers, most of that's VDOT grants, but revenues of just under $5.9 million. We spent on a cash basis so far $4.3 million on projects. We're going to accrue another $1.43 million. Got a big bill for underground wiring still yet to be paid. Did sidewalk repairs. You've noticed a beautiful sidewalk right up Lafayette Street. We'll be getting bills for those over the next 6 weeks. Also, a little bit more on Stryker Center and school capital projects. So taking this all in consideration, this is the fund balance that we had last June 30th. $30,643,000 broken down into these categories here. So if we add in our total estimated revenues, take out expenses, we're estimating $30.57 million. We'll have to add in the bond proceeds. That'll make its way to fund balance and the balance sheet when we're all done. But we'll be at about $35.5 million in overall surplus for the year. And we'll break that down. We've got the non-spendable. We've got land held for resale. This is the Tioga property and the Lord Paget that we still own. They're classified as non-spendable. Committed. We have a commitment for the Stryker Center, about $5.3 million left on that. The unassigned is actually the 35% of the federal of the reserve policy, and then we put all the residual up in here under assigned. And that is goes a long way toward funding the remainder of the 5-year capital plan. And that's where we're at the end of the year, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you may have.
Phil, thank you for that. Let me turn to council for any questions or comments.
I have one question. Mr. Serra, you mentioned an amount of about $450,000 in estimated expense accrual, and you described that as a conservative estimate. Does that mean you think it could likely come in less than that? Okay.
It did last year.
Scott? Okay. Phil, thank you very much. I mean, it's times are tight, but we've been able to maintain our fund balance. And go back to that last your last slide. I mean, basically, our in reality, the unassigned balances are the 11 plus the 17. We just choose to assign the 17 to capital projects, but they're not for particular projects at this point in time. They're just there in case we have capital projects we want to use. So in essence, it's really that almost $28 million that is available to us.
Yes.
It's as unencumbered.
Very close to what it is.
Yeah.
May I make
Thank you.
one
Yeah.
other observation? In addition to keeping a strong reserve fund, I think it's also worth noting that the city's been able to engage in a number of projects to improve the overall community. So it's not just keeping stable this pot of money that's at our disposal. It's doing a lot of good along the way each year and still maintaining enough money to have more projects on the books going forward, which I think there's several examples we can cite in and around the downtown area and throughout the city where significant improvements continue to be made. And that's a collective effort of everybody on staff, working together and working carefully to accomplish something that we can all be proud of.
And then the follow-up to that, one of the observations that I made in a previous conversation is, we have the surplus and we have been able to control our expenses, but we're not deferring maintenance on critical issues. We are still spending money on those things that are important to the health and safety of our community, and so we're not pushing or kicking the can down the road as somebody might say. We're staying on top of those issues, and I think that's an important aspect. We would like to see revenue grow, and we're all working towards that. And I think hopefully things will start to turn around. But all things considered, I think we're in a good, healthy position.
And I think we owe a lot to Jack and the staff for their efforts to really keep doing more without much more. So it's been really a tremendous effort on everybody's part. So thank you. And thanks, Phil. Anybody else? Thank you. The next city manager report is the Stryker Center progress update from Stephen Peace.
Right. I'm going to turn it over to the team and
Okay.
whoever wants to start.
Welcome again.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Council. So we have Sam Daniel with us, and in addition to some of the images, we're going to show a big interest is the projected schedule. So Sam is here, he even has his calculator in his pocket. Fine-tuning, so yeah, so there will probably be questions. We're going to show you a few slides. It's a fairly short summary of where we are, and since we're pretty heavily in the midst of construction documents, and most of you know where we are design-wise, we do have images so that people don't conceive where things have evolved. So,
yes, as Ed says, thank you, Council, for your interest in the project, and we've enjoyed meeting with each of you individually, and we know that you're pretty well up to speed with where we are, so we'll move through this rapidly, keep it pretty high level, and happy to go into the weeds if you would like to.
so
Jump right into the building elevations, which we pointed out to the ARB Tuesday night that there was three design elements that had changed since the last time they saw it. The first one was the roof forms, which was really a balance of some compositional issues that we thought we needed to take a little bit of a closer look at, and solving some technical issues with controlling daylight and really making those things more responsive to what's happening in those spaces. The other one is that based on the grading and some additional survey data that we got, we now have an at-grade entry at the main entrance, so there's no accessible ramp or any of that. It's sort of equal dignity for everyone entering the building. And then the third one is we've refined a bit further the quantities of brick and precast and tried to make the building just a little bit more legible about where the important spaces are and sort of create a bit of a hierarchy. Any questions? So this is, I should say, this is, of course, the boundary street elevation on the top and the south elevation, which is viewed from the library.
I should also say these are taken from an early digital model, and the grades as they exist are not shown here. We have some other drawings that show that. So this still shows that south entry with the steps, where the steps really happen primarily on the east, on the boundary street side. So they're still at 3-step up in the terrace and plant.
So this is the west elevation on the top, and then the north elevation below. One point to sort of note: this north elevation will be perceived very differently because we're going to return to the original grade and save the existing street trees and that sort of nice green environment that's there. So you'll have much more of a filtered view from Lafayette Street.
So then the next group of images, they're somewhat arbitrary. We kind of selected a few from the construction documents as they are now. So this is one of the civil drawings. We can flip through there pretty quickly.
Yeah, the site plan submission was made on June 30th, so we've been in review with the city, and after already having some very productive discussions with staff ahead of that, so that's all in motion.
Yeah, so these are really sort of a sampling of where we are. This is the architectural landscaping plan, sort of going back to the discussion of your reservoir. We've worked with some of the folks in the city and the landscape architect we're working with, and having a palette of plant material that is going to be drought resistant, so that when we do have those periods of drought, we will not have a sad landscape to accompany that. That's certainly the intent. But again, these are the floor plans as they currently exist, and if you look hard, you can kind of see where the steps on the east side, boundary street side, are still there as the grade falls away. And as the grade rises, we're up to the accessible entry on the south. Down on the north end, there's actually 8 steps down to grade, so the land is falling significantly, 4 or 5 feet at that point, which I think in the end is a much more interesting kind of setting for the building. And in addition, we get to save a number of the existing trees, as David alluded to. Just a reflected ceiling plan, sort of progress. These are some of the construction document elevations that are accurate and up to date. You can begin to see how the grades are working. They're not pretty, we're just, again, they're sampling. Cross sections, et cetera. There's a whole lot of that stuff, if you want to, any of you want to see it. We do have this slide with significant dates, and Sam has a much longer list of dates, but we thought it would be good to touch on these. We did get the ARB approval on the 8th, so we were happy about that. The only thing that we have to go back for is to show them the final materials that we come up with once the budget is settled on and we know what is affordable, et cetera. So they do want to see that. So it's kind of a conditional approval, but it counts as an approval. So site development begins. All these are what we anticipate and hope will happen. 11 of August, raising the existing Stryker building, which I'm sure you've been asked that a million times. We'd love to think this will happen around the 14th of August. Final Planning Commission approval, so on the 20th of August when they meet. Building permits can be submitted the next day. We can't submit for permits, or Sam can't, until Planning Commission approves the site plan. So we're hoping we can get that in approximately 8 or 9 days, receive all permits 29th, and the building pad being ready 16th of October, which means footings can begin to be dug at that point. And I think I should probably let Sam say this, but we have talked, so if I'm saying anything wrong, but we anticipate 12 months for construction, possibly less. Is that fair? So, those are the highlights. But if you want the detail, Sam's the detail. Just one thing, we do have our trusty model here that has continued to evolve, and if anyone wants to look more closely at it, it has the current roof forms as they're being developed in the construction documents.
Terrific. Thank you very much for the update. I guess several questions. If someone wanted to take a look at the model, do they just contact you, or is there a place we can have that available? What's your thinking on that?
I mean, I guess it could stay here if that's easier. If you have that kind of interest, we're happy to have people come by the office, either one.
Okay. And you may want to talk to Genevieve at the library whether they would like to have a place or have a place for it where the public could come in,
Okay.
take a closer look. But that's something to think
We'll
about.
talk to Genevieve.
Any other questions, comments?
2 questions. Could you just talk, well, as long as you'd like to, but don't not elaborate too much, briefly on the advantages of the reconfiguration of the roof relative to the interior lighting of the building?
Sure. As David said, there are kind of 2 realms of thinking about that. One was somewhat compositional, trying to make the roofs feel like they were better integrated into the overall building. But that was also concurrent with, really, when we first started looking at it, it was trying to really to approach it from how these roofs are performing in terms of letting in natural light. And we felt like we're trying to get down to kind of the essence of how we wanted these roofs to work and not lose some of the critical parts of the original design, which was to have glass on the north over the council building and glass on the south over the exhibition space and the entry. And our idea early on was that at night those could be lit up, they become lanterns, so we certainly didn't want to lose that. So they were a given, and in a way it was very fortunate because the light in the city council building, we really wanted to keep it as diffuse and indirect as we could, and that just having a north-facing clear story accomplishes that with very little effort. On the south end, it's going to be a nice thing, we think, to have more natural light. We're going to be baffling the direct light with larger overhangs and some ceiling baffles, so there will never be direct light into the space, but there'll be a lot of ambient light bouncing around certain times of the year, especially in the winter when the sun is lower. So it'll be light coming into that space, but it will, again, never hit the floor or artwork directly. But it'll be a much more animated space in terms of light. So from that standpoint, performance, we think it works better. It kind of gets to the essence of what we wanted to do. From a compositional standpoint, the fact that both roofs are sloping down towards that clear story just seemed to make it just felt a much more kind of natural landscape, if you want to call it, their topography of the swarms as they rise and go down towards the center, the clear story comes up. On the south side, they rise back up. So there again, that's somewhat of a subjective thing, but it was based on some compositional concerns and trying to improve over the initial gable roof scheme.
And one of the important factors in controlling the light that was coming into the council chamber was related to presentations and the
Yes.
ability to dim the lights enough in order for the audience and the public to be able to see a presentation such as this
Right.
without
Yeah.
direct light.
Right. So in the council chamber, that's going to be, if we wanted to, we could really darken. All the windows are going to have, they're going to have shades. So that we can't, I don't know if we use blackout shades, but if we needed to really get it super dark, we could. But I think to get, even without a lot of effort, having the glass just on the north side with the kind of ceiling treatment that we're having, everything's going to be very diffuse and indirect. So we're very confident that we can dim it down without even lowering the shades. So we still have a little bit of modeling to do on that to tweak it, but that's how that space is going to work.
And one other question. Could you possibly say a few words about the discussion relative to the material composition that's related to the conditional approval by the ARB?
Yeah, you want to pick up on that?
We're looking at several types of brick, precast, and that set of exterior material choices is sort of a subset of a much larger group of discussions, of decisions that are fluid even today, as we're finalizing interior finishes and making decisions that are driven by the budget. So, we'll have a point where we'll know exactly what's available for everything and make sure that we can tune it. We presented a handful of brick types Tuesday night, all of which were acceptable to the ARB, I believe. And but they just wanted to have on record, this is going to be the old Virginia wood mold brick number 1218, so that it can be sort of tracked going forward. So I don't think there was any pushback from a design standpoint. It was just the specificity that this really should be required with the case.
Yes, I think the choice of materials was the same, but we did keep it generic for the reasons David said, so that we had the option to go to the slightly better one if the budget's there, or to cut down a little bit, still within the acceptable range of quality.
So they're comfortable with the range, but they want to know what the final decision is.
Yes, and I think there certainly would, I think for probably everyone involved in the project, we'd love to do it the very best we possibly can, but, there's always a budget. So that's the goal, to do it the best we can and keep it and work it within the acceptable range.
Yeah, I think the overriding message from the ARB was use the very best materials, which we would always choose to do that when a budget allows you to. So this kind of leaves the door open for us to get as close to that as we can and to understand that just as a goal.
Thank you.
Scott?
Well, and talk a little bit more about the finishings. And I'm not a student of architecture and maybe have very little understanding of what truly happens, but one of the things that I kind of called for early on in this discussion was having good materials come in so that they last longer, and kind of what I think we all hope for is a building that lasts 50 years, and we're not a 20-year building, and I think a lot of that is dependent on the type of finishes that we have, and so I'm glad that you're having that discussion, and ARB is kind of helping you along that way. So good that discussion is going, and I'd hate to see us go too cheap or take too much money out of Sam's pocket by keeping the best up there without changing the budget. The other thing that I raised the issue of is the accessibility to the dais for anybody with handicap. If you're a member of the planning commission and you're in a wheelchair, you have to go down the hall and come in the back door, and I just that concerns me. And so, or if you're the mayor and you have to give a presentation, where do you go out to do that. And so I think, for me, that's a big element of what we're missing in this building. And I know we've talked about that, and I don't know where you are in terms of.
I'm glad you mentioned it. We have talked about it, and we have always kind of parked it on the side to see how everyone else feels, because it's something I think we could accommodate without a whole lot of trouble or effort.
Yeah.
I don't think it wouldn't represent a compromise to anything. It's just, do you want to do it? And
Yeah.
that's probably a bigger discussion we should have. Maybe
For me,
not
it's
here.
important. So.
No, but it's a good point. I'm glad you raised it, because with all the other issues with that one, it sits out there and it needs to be addressed one way or the other. So,
Yeah, I vote for dealing with it, and I don't know what staff or the rest of the council feels about it. But
do you want to take a look at the plan real quick and just to remind some of you?
Yeah, why don't you go to the,
Sorry that it doesn't read all that well. Yes, it looks very light where I am. But over on the upper side of the plan, here's the dais, and we have the 2 steps up to the stage. We talked about possibly having an accessible ramp on that side, so someone could, the whole building, including, can be navigable by someone who could.
because currently now, if everybody came in the front door, that person with a handicap has to go down the hallway and then come in the back door.
Right.
Right.
where it's.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, it seems to me.
Be on the dais.
Yeah.
But it seems to me, sort of, you've made the entrance sort of equitable for everyone, and is there a way in the council chamber to maintain that same sense?
Yeah, the answer is yes. And I think if we get the clear direction you want us to pursue it, we'll do it. And you can tell us now and we'll do it. But I think, so is that something you want us to take a look at?
Well, I think it would be helpful for you to take a look at it and bring it back to us, so we could see sort of exactly, what does that mean? What do we gain? What do we lose?
Right.
And so we could make a decision.
Sure. We'll do that.
Judy?
No.
anything? Go back to the elevation, if you would. Sort of a couple, a couple things that I like about this is I like the at-grade entrance, and I think that's a real improvement. As you know, I was a big proponent for the gabled roof initially, but I think as I've thought about it and reflected on it, I think this building represents a transition. We have sort of the community building and the chamber and the Singley building that represent a certain view of an architectural statement, what have you. And then we have the library and police statement with flat roofs. And it seems to me these what you've done with the roof here provides a transition between those that make this building fit. Initially, I thought needed the gable roof to fit with the community building and what have you. But as I thought about this and reflected on it, I think it does help make a transition between those gabled roof buildings and the flat roof buildings. And this is sort of an intermediate step that sort of ties things together in a very, very nice way. So,
I wish I could say that were our initial motive. Sort of a secondary.
Form follows function, as we all know. The other thing is that it's maintained, as you said earlier, at night those glasses portions will be lit and will be a beacon for the community, and I think that's important to keep that up. So.
And I want to say one thing. So we met with Jack. Jack made the comment. We were explaining to Jack and Dan about the grade issues, how the grade was higher. And just Jack mentioned, gosh, I always liked it elevated, and I think we do too, but what we really, when you think about it, the building hasn't lowered. The grade has sort of risen to the building in effect. So particularly on that the Boundary Street side, it's still up at those 3 steps, and then as you move north, it even comes out of the ground more. So I think that the overall effect of that is going to be a taller building, even though it's not really. But again, the relative height from top of wall and top of roof to grade. So.
Well, that promontory feature that we described at the southeast corner there, where the porch sort of is risen up above the green, that survives, and as the building falls a bit to the east. The grade falls, the building.
Building rises.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Just a thought, I mean, to your point, it reminds me of wanting to keep that illuminated. It doesn't, not bright, but just a light glow, because to me, again, this is the people's building, and the people never sleep, and government's always working for them, and that's kind of what I get out of that. So I'm glad we didn't lose that aspect of in the roof change. So.
I'm just sorry they didn't subscribe to my trapezoidal roof suggestion.
They tried. The other thing I like is the brick. Is that pre-stressed or post-stressed concrete columns?
No,
It'll be just concrete.
Clad. Yeah, clad.
Clad, okay. That does echo the existing Stryker building in some way, that you have that concrete, and it's a slight echo, but it's an echo, and that's nice too, I think. So you've done some really nice things with this.
Yeah, I totally see a lot of the elements of Stryker in there, and so I think that's good.
Any other comments? Well, Ed, David, Sam, thank you all very much for being here. We really look forward to the next year plus working with you guys and seeing this building out of the ground and ready to occupy in hopefully October of 15. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Next is the Williamsburg Stormwater Management Plan update. Jack?
Yes, City Engineer Small will give this report.
Aaron, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm here to present the final piece of the puzzle for our for this year at least, for our stormwater management program. Before your consideration today is the adoption of the Williamsburg Stormwater Management Plan. This is an update from our original plan, which was adopted by council in November of 1997. I will say it is significantly thinner than the 97 report, which was about a 3-inch binder, and this is what we have today. The purpose of this plan is to provide an overall framework for the city's efforts to meet our regulatory requirements, conform to the comprehensive plan, and to provide a clear direction for the program into the future. The plan will be submitted to the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, to demonstrate compliance with our various laws and regulations governing stormwater here in the Commonwealth. 5 goals are presented in the stormwater plan. These are to basically provide a working document that evolves as changes in the stormwater management regulations and concerns occur, a way to address water quality to meet those regulatory requirements, a way to address water quantity control to meet those regulatory requirements, addressing maintenance of the existing infrastructure, as well as to facilitate planning and funding of stormwater management projects into the future. Also included in the plan, the colors didn't turn out real well here, but is a analysis and description of the management practices for each of the 7 watersheds that drain the city. These watershed management plans describe unique conditions and issues, which are evaluated for 5 categories of erosion and sedimentation, flooding, water quality, physical conditions, and maintenance concerns. From these watershed management plans and the 5 goals, we've also provided a brief listing of potential capital projects and potential funding sources for some of those. And finally, this last slide is a listing of the next steps that we need for the program, and it's based upon my presentation from the March work session. And what we show here is our next step is to prepare our Chesapeake Bay TMDL action plan through the next year. My goal is to try and get that ready in time for budget sessions in January, February timeframe. And also we will then have to prepare our TMDL action plans for Queens Creek and College Creek in fiscal year 16. And then we will also begin to meet those projects to reduce our pollutant loads for the Chesapeake TMDL by fiscal year 18. And then finally, we'll also be working towards complying with our new MS4 conditions from our permit that was issued last year, including preparing nutrient management plans for municipal properties, preparing a stormwater pollution prevention plan for our city shop facility, as well as increasing and continuing our efforts towards dry weather screening for illicit discharges. So with that, I will thank you again for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Aaron, thank you very much. I know a lot of effort has gone into this, and we're just at the beginning, but thank you, and I'll turn to council for any comments or questions.
The only comment is really more of an observation just on the map. It's interesting, I see each area is identified by the point of collection of stormwater from that particular section of
Yes.
the city. And I don't, until you see something like this visually represented, it's not something that wouldn't have naturally occurred to me that we have that many different ways that water flows within the city depending upon where it falls.
Well, and to tell the truth, the city was founded over 400 years ago to be at the ridge line. And so the actual natural ridge line does run through, right through the middle of town, such that the watersheds that we label as Chisel Run, College Creek, Paper Mill Creek, and Tutter's Creek all flow to the James River. And then the Queens Creek watershed, which is basically everything north of Duke of Gloucester Street, as well as we have a small piece up Richmond Road that drains through the Waller Mill Reservoir. Those both go to the York River. So we kind of differentiated into the individual creek beds so that it gives us a better way of managing how that stormwater is discharged into those individual locations.
Does having that many different points in a small geographical area help pinpoint more closely where problems might exist?
Yes, it does. Very much does. It makes it easier to determine, okay, if we know that we've got an issue in this one area, we can isolate, what's the cause of that problem in a very quick time frame.
Thank you.
Scott?
Noticed the other day, Chesapeake Bay Foundation published the EPA report of all the Chesapeake Bay states and how we were doing. Virginia's done very well, as you will point out, with point source discharge, cleaning up municipal wastewater treatment plants, but where we're lacking is non-point and stormwater. So this is good, not only a good time to be doing this, but also a refreshing recollection of really what little stake in this we have, but we're still doing a good job. So
Yes.
I really appreciate all your hard work.
No, I too appreciate all the work of you and staff putting all that together and helping us all understand better what it is that we're up against and making sure that we conform to all the regulations. And there's a lot of them. And I do think that the city has done a good job staying on top of it as best we can. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
I, too, continue to be impressed by how well the city doesn't put things off, as you were talking about in the budget hearings. We're dealing with things as they're coming up, and we're not shoving them aside, and I think that's really important. So thank you.
Aaron, thank you very much. We'll be hearing more, I'm sure, over the next couple of years.
Do we need to?
Hopefully not as often as we have in the past.
Yeah, do we need to adopt the
Yes.
plan? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council adopt the Williamsburg Stormwater Management Plan dated July 2014.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Aye.
Mr. Pond.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Next report is Virginia Retirement System School Division Certification Concurrence, proposed resolution 14-09.
This is a housekeeping item where the city must approve and certify the rate that the school division will pay for VRS contribution, just as we did last month for the city itself. And under the current state law, it has to be done by city council resolution. We were discussing that this might be an item for our legislative agenda, to suggest there's really no good reason why we should take this action. If we're going to adopt the approved VRS rate anyway, why we have to say that through all this paperwork makes no sense, but we need to do it, so we suggest you do it.
Okay, any questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council approve Resolution 14-09, concurring with the WJCC School Division's election of the VRS certified rate of 7.22% for its non-professional employee classification for the 2015-2016 biennium.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Ms. Newton.
Aye.
Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Mayor Filer.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Next are city attorney reports. We have two. First is the 2014 legislative overview. Chris?
As you know, every year I try to come to council with some of the things that happened at the General Assembly session for the year. There were a lot of bills introduced this year, but there was not a lot that was passed that affects local government, at least not the city of Williamsburg, and so this may be the shortest one of these you've ever had from me. But I am going to hit a few highlights for council's information or things that council is likely to see again in the upcoming months. The General Assembly approved that a referendum be put on the November ballot this year to reject an amendment or approve an amendment to the Constitution to provide a real estate tax exemption for the surviving spouse of a soldier killed in action. The exemption, as proposed, would cease when the spouse remarries. If it's adopted as part of the referendum, then it would begin in 2015, and the exemption is up to the average assessed value of dwellings assessed as single-family residential in the jurisdiction. And the exemption would include the dwelling and up to 1 acre. So if this is adopted, it would take effect January 1st.
May I ask a question? Is that only specific to the primary residence?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a court case out of Botetourt County that necessitated a clarification in the exemption for churches and religious groups. The clarification provides that religious activities includes outdoor worship, ancillary and accessory purposes involved with augmenting religious worship, or as required by federal, state, or local law. And an example of that would be requirements for building code, mechanical rooms, and things that wouldn't necessarily directly affect worship, but is necessary for the operation of the building. As usual, the General Assembly has prohibited annexation for this biennium from this year through 2016, so that continues.
Does that need to be continued every biennium?
It does. There were a lot of suggested changes to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. As a result of all of those, they have sent it to the FOIA Council for study, and the expectation is that we'll see some pretty significant changes to FOIA in next year's General Assembly session. But for this year, the primary change to FOIA is that localities can utilize electronic participation methods, so telephone, Skype, for members to participate in a meeting because of a personal issue or an emergency, or because of a temporary or permanent disability, so long as the body has adopted a written policy which allows that exemption, allows that participation to occur. That's the next item for council to consider under my reports today. So in that event, for a personal or an emergency situation, there has to be a quorum physically present at the meeting, and that then there has to be approval by the members who are physically present at the meeting. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's one of the things that council is going to need to consider. House Bill 1084 creates a complaint process whereby an applicant for an approval or a permit, so for example a rezoning, a special use permit, where they believe that the grant or denial of that permit or approval was based on an unconstitutional condition, can now be awarded compensatory damage, reasonable attorney's fees for the complaint that they filed based on that unconstitutional condition. So, for example, if the condition in a special use permit essentially results in a taking, then they can file a complaint and obtain compensatory damages and reasonable attorney's fees and costs because it's an unconstitutional condition. In that event, then, the court is required and will order the locality to grant the approval without the unconstitutional condition as part of it. If the condition is not the only factor, but one of the factors, and the applicant has notified the locality in advance that they believe this particular condition is unconstitutional, then they have a presumption that that factor is the reason for the approval or the denial. And the locality is then obligated to prove by clear and convincing evidence that it was not. So it's fairly convoluted, but it essentially provides a process for applicants to be awarded compensatory damages and attorney's fees if everything that we do in our permit process is not constitutional.
Could we talk about that for just a second?
I'll try.
Okay. If the unconstitutional condition is somehow perceived as a restriction on the use of the property, whereas the property's not completely and wholly taken, it's just limiting the use, there's still a taking element in there.
Right. And
So that almost makes it sound like any time you have a special use permit where you can limit somebody's use of a property, they have a grievance.
But they have to demonstrate that they've fully prohibited the person from using their property in order for it to rise to a constitutional violation. Let me give you another example.
That would be helpful.
Sure. We have regulations on signs and what's permitted on signs. If someone wanted to have a sign and we denied that the sign that they've requested, they could potentially argue that we violated their First Amendment rights if we prohibit them from saying something that they want to say. Now, I'm not saying that that would be something they would be able to prevail on, but they have to show that we violated their constitutional rights in order to obtain the damages and reasonable attorney's fees. But once they make that argument successfully, then we're going to be obligated to undo that regulation or that condition.
So what if we have a special use permit process that allows for certain uses in a particular zoning area or zoning district with a public hearing and approval, and somebody comes in with a use that is not approved because it went through the special use permit process, it's not a by right use, but their use would be allowed under certain circumstances with special use, but because it was denied, they then view it as you've reduced the value of my property and therefore taken something from me.
But we haven't fully denuded the value of their property. It has to be a taking so that they can't use their property.
At all, not
Right.
just for what they want to use it for.
This is going to be fun.
It is. All right, the Conflict of Interest Act, I'm sure that you've seen there was lots of discussion about this, and for purposes of what they did, they created a state advisory panel. Most of what they did affects the state. They did, however, and not necessarily localities alone, they did revise the definition of a gift, so it's also pretty lengthy. I didn't put it in the slide because it's so lengthy, but there are exceptions for things received from family members or from personal friends who are not a lobbyist. I would suggest that you may want to read that on your own. They provided that disclosure statements are required for gifts received in excess of $250 a year. That can be an accumulated amount over the course of a calendar year, or it can be one $250,000 or over $250,000 event. $250 event. Provides that certain local officials and employees, not city council members, but those employees who are required to file disclosure statements every year under previous law are now required to file those disclosure statements 2 times every year. There also, along with that, there was some concern regarding the use of public assets. So localities are now permitted to adopt an ordinance that provides that a non-full-time officer, agent, employee, or elected official who misuses public assets when the value of that use exceeds $1,000 over the course of a 12-month period is guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. This is not required. This is discretionary. They also do require that the locality adopt policies regarding the employee's personal use of public property, for example, computers, telephones, fax machines. We already have that in our personnel manual.
What about a full-time officer? Is there already?
It's expressly non-full-time officer, employee, or agent of the locality. We would argue that an employee who misuses public assets with a dollar amount would be guilty of either a misdemeanor or a felony based on dollar use. Localities was one change to comprehensive plan requirements, and that is localities are now required to consider how to align their transportation infrastructure and facilities with affordable, accessible housing and community services as part of the transportation component of the comprehensive plan. So how do people get from where they live to the services that they need as part of the comprehensive plan analysis? Localities are permitted to require the submission of a preliminary subdivision plat for tentative approval for subdivisions in excess of 50 lots. Our current requirement is 25 lots, so this increases the number of lots before someone is required to file a preliminary subdivision plat. We are also required to give landowners the option to submit for a tentative approval of plats for 50 or fewer lots, so it's basically they can come and find out if this is a subdivision that is going to be approved, the plat's going to be approved, but they're not obligated to come in unless they have 50 or more lots. And finally, another zoning change that council will be seeing. Previous state law required the locality to permit licensed group homes of 8 or fewer individuals when there was a resident staff person who lived on site. House Bill 527 amends that to also now permit non-resident staff persons for the licensed group home. So that change is going to be in front of the Planning Commission, I think, next month, and council should see that the month after. And really, this was the shortest one I think I've ever done. There were some other things that the General Assembly adopted related to Parks and Recreation that didn't apply to what we currently do. There were some bills that involved reporting of child sexual abuse and protocol processes for investigating and reporting those. I did not put those in the legislative agenda because they're very specific to human services.
Terrific. Chris, thank you very much. Any questions, further questions?
Just a question, thought, going to HB 158, the annexation, and I know there's a long history as to why General Assembly took away the ability to do annexation. But I wonder if it isn't something that we should put on our legislative agenda. Hardly a month goes by that if somebody doesn't say something to me about Monticello Avenue and the lack of lighting and adequate bike paths on there. And the answer seems to always be, well, we can't get into that because it's the college land, you can't annex it. So and that might not be the right discussion, but it might be that we take a position on annexation going forward. So just a thought.
Okay, that's something we can discuss at the retreat in more detail. And in terms of the Monticello Avenue sidewalk lighting, bike paths, we actually are in conversation with the college about something there. So, Jack, do you want to say anything at this point, or just
that case? That would be a state ownership question as opposed to city regulatory control and city control over the roadway. But there are many places other than that where there are that are just over the city limit line that might make sense that they would be in the city of Williamsburg, but you can't get from here to there.
Right.
So it is something the state has, since they put the moratorium on in 1984, I believe, has really not addressed seriously since then to say what reasonable way can we adjust city-county lines in Virginia for better government. Mm-hmm. And they simply have washed their hands of the issue practically and have locked in this moratorium, just extending it year by year. And initially it was a moratorium to study the issue and determine the most appropriate ways, but it's just locked boundaries in. And the conditions are so different in Northern Virginia versus the Richmond area and Hampton Roads that it's very clear that one size will not fit all because the regional differences are so great. So it's complex, it's difficult, but it has to be addressed someday in Virginia.
Is there any value to proposing to VML, if they haven't already done this, to convene some sort of discussion or analysis of the problems and how some of those, they can't create the solution, but they can at least get the conversation going. in a broader context than we can.
I think there were actually, those conversations were very active in the late 80s and in the 90s, but folks have just given up because there is no receptiveness on the part of the General Assembly to deal with this issue.
And we're particularly influenced because we have historic boundaries that bear no relationship to the reality of land use today.
Right.
And it just creates anomalies that people continually shake their heads at.
And it may well be that annexation never returns, and we would live with that, but I would at least like to understand why and not, well, just because. That's all.
Okay.
Oh, can I ask another, have we received the background information on the conflict of interest? Do we have that?
It's in the legislative update. I'm not sure whether you've received that, but I will make sure that you do.
Or a link to it? Or
I will make sure.
That would be helpful.
Thanks. Anything else for Chris on this? Next, Chris, is the relocation of city council chambers and adoption of absentee meeting policy, proposed ordinance 14-19.
My colleague drafted this with two things in it, so I'm going to deal with those independently. The first is housekeeping, and the ordinance records that the meetings of City Council will occur in this room as opposed to in Stryker Building, which is just housekeeping to amend the city code to reflect what's actually occurring. So that's bullet point 1 of the ordinance. The second is the electronic meeting policy that I referred to. If council desires to adopt a policy where one of the members of council who is not physically present because of a personal issue or an emergency would like to participate in the meeting, you can adopt the policy that's contained in 1419, which has specific requirements. This is the FOIA council model of how these policies should be drafted, so the language is coming directly from the FOIA council. That the mayor or the vice mayor needs to be notified that the individual would like to attend, either using the telephone or Skype. The members of council who are present has to approve that electronic participation, and there has to be a quorum of council present at the meeting site in order for that to occur. If council disapprove, and the individual has to provide enough information for council and the members of the public to know why they can't physically be present at the meeting. If council disapproves the members' participation, that has to be recorded in the minutes. And this is only available to council members 2 times per year for personal reasons. For disabilities, there's no specific limit on that except what's contained in the city's charter, which is council members need to attend the meetings, and if they miss more than 3 meetings, then council needs to address that issue. So if council desires to do that, then the policy is contained in the ordinance. I'll answer any questions that you have regarding that. If council does not wish to do that, council should just adopt bullet 1 of section of ordinance 1419.
Thank you, Chris. Let's come back to council for questions or discussion. I mean, this is not, the second part is not something we have to do, but I could envision situations where somebody's injured or ill and can't be here, and we might want to accommodate that in some way, and that's what this does.
Someone gets stuck on 64
right.
trying to get to a council meeting, and they can participate in the meeting via their cell phone.
Okay.
So it's specifically to address those situations, or when a member of council has an injury or disability that prohibits them from physically attending, but they can still participate in the proceedings.
And any questions on either of those?
I have a question on the first one. Is it really necessary to say the specific place that city council
It's
meets?
contained in the city code now, and so we're just trying to update the city code so it reflects what's actually happening.
Okay, but is there a requirement? I'm just curious, is that something that is a necessary component of code? Or just because it's there?
Other than the fact that our code is not currently accurate,
Yes,
is
okay.
why it's in front of council.
But does the code even need to specify that? I think is part of the question. Is that a bridge too far?
It does not, but if council wants to remove it, then we would simply need to remove it.
No, I don't feel strongly one way or the other. The other question is on the second bullet, obviously. Other than the disability situation, so that's probably a personal matter, council needs to approve the members physically
Who are
present.
physically present.
What criteria are they to use to make that judgment?
If this person has a legitimate reason, council has to use its discretion in determining whether the reason is legitimate or not.
It seems, and I don't know what the solution is here, and I don't think it would impact us under the current makeup of this body, but it seems to create a situation where you could really have an unfortunate outcome based upon the majority of the people present as to whether or not it's advantageous to their particular motivations for that meeting to have that other member participate.
The requirement is that it be evenly and appropriately applied to all members of council, not based on which member of council that it is. So that's the criteria that we have in code.
But I don't get the sense that and I know I've missed meetings because I've been out of the country or what have you. Others have missed meetings. It doesn't seem to me that that's created a problem for the functioning of council or anything else. So I'm not sure how.
I'm not opposed to doing it. I just think it's odd that the people who are, if you don't have some sort of objective set of criteria, it could be real murky about how the decision is made whether to allow that absent member to participate. That's more about the legislation, I suppose, than the
If we
issue.
decided not to do it today, and at some point there was a circumstance where we wanted to enact this, we would still have to advertise it, or could we vote and enact it and then
It
go
would
in
have to
discussion?
be on council's agenda as, in the same manner that it was now. This doesn't require a public hearing.
And again, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I just think it's kind of odd.
It's an odd,
Sure.
and we might as well. I guess I would go ahead and do it because you never know what situation might arise, and this gives you some flexibility in that situation.
How, James City County, not too long ago, had at least one member participating electronically.
So does the school board.
So that was allowed without any kind of,
It is no longer allowed without a written policy.
okay.
Okay, so we need.
I'm on another board, though, which has one member who does it on a regular basis. I know this ordinance says only 2 times a year, but this person does it for almost every meeting. And it gets really awkward. I mean, part of communication is looking, and it's not Skype, it's just the telephone, so you can't see the person. And I find it very awkward. I really do, so. But again, I'm not opposed to it. I mean, we can put it in
Well,
place.
it does give us more flexibility.
Yeah, it gives us flexibility, which is nice. Yeah.
I haven't spent a whole lot of time, thinking about it or reading about it and knowing something about any unintended consequences. So I don't think I'd be prepared to make a decision today. But I'm again, like everybody else, not opposed to doing something. And since we can do it in the future, if the circumstances arise where we would want to do it, that's still available to us.
Are people comfortable postponing this and giving us some time to think about it? Do we need to do anything formal to postpone or just postpone?
No, you just need to adopt Section 1.
I had a question about Section 1A. Go ahead. Go ahead,
This
Scott.
is really a response to what's already gone on with people phoning in remotely, instead of, we're going to extend you this opportunity.
Yeah, right.
I just had a question about Bullet 1, the meeting place. We meet other places. We meet with the school board, we meet with the planning commission.
Regular meetings of city council.
So this doesn't preclude our ability to go to James Blair and meet with the school board. Okay.
So what I'm hearing is council would like to postpone the second part for future consideration, but I think we need to move forward with the first.
I would suggest that council then adopt Section 1 of proposed ordinance 1419, and then when council would like this to appear on their agenda again, they can let me know, and I will
Okay.
put it in the city attorney report.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve Proposed ordinance 14-19, relocation to city council chamber.
Section 1.
Section 1, excuse me.
Okay.
Second.
Section 1, relocation to city council chamber.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Ms. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Pond.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Next agenda item is unfinished business. We have none. And that brings us to new business, and we have several. The first is appointments to boards, commissions, proposed resolution 14-10.
Waiting for me.
Waiting for you.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council reappoint effective July 1st, 2014, Sandra Lenthal to the Social Services Advisory Board for a 4-year term to expire June 30, 2018, and that City Council adopt Resolution 14-10, reappointing effective August 1st, 2014, Channing M. Hall III and Louis F. Rossiter to the Quarterpath Community Development Authority and Charles D. Brooks as alternate to the Quarterpath Community Development Authority for 4-year terms to expire July 31, 2018.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Walton?
Ms. Newsom.
Aye.
Mr. Pond.
Aye.
Mayor Holman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
There are a number of committee appointments that are made by the city and by the mayor, and so let me read through those. Many of them stay the same as they've been in the past. There are a couple changes, and I will note those as we go through. The regional committees, there are a number of the Hampton Roads mayors and chairs. I represent the city there. Peninsula mayors and chairs, I represent the city there. The Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, Jack Tuttle and I represent the city there, and I'm currently the vice chair of the Planning District Commission. The Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, Jack Tuttle and I represent the city, and Judy Knutson is the alternative. The new one here is the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, and I'll speak to that in just a few minutes. And I represent the city there by state statute. The Hampton Roads Military Federal Facilities Alliance, I represent the city. Hampton Roads Economic Development Alliance, Doug Pons will continue to represent the city there. The Greater Peninsula Workforce Development Consortium, Judy Knutson will continue to represent the city there. And Virginians for High-Speed Rail Board of Directors, Paul Freiling will continue to represent the city there. And finally, the Cultural Alliance of Hampton Roads, I represent the city there. Historic Triangle committees include the Historic Triangle Collaborative, and Jack Tuttle and I represent the city there. The Regional Issues Committee, Judy Knutson will now represent the city council there, and that's a change. The Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance, Scott Foster will continue to represent the city. The Williamsburg Area Destination Marketing Committee, effective August 1st, Doug Pons will represent the city on WADMAC. The School Liaison Committee, Doug Pons and I will continue to represent the city there. And the Williamsburg Transit Authority, Jody Miller will continue to represent the city with Carolyn Murphy as the alternative. City committees, the Finance and Audit Committee, the mayor serves as chair of that. The Neighborhood Council, Williamsburg, I attend all the meetings, council members. One other council member attends the meetings on a rotating basis. The Williamsburg Economic Development Authority, Paul Freiling will continue to be the city council liaison. The Local Emergency Planning Committee, Scott Foster will represent the city, and Old Town Medical Center, Judy Knutson will continue to represent the city. Jack, these are available to anyone both on the website and by hard copy if they wish it. Okay, thank you. Finally, since we didn't have a work session where we could report on from council representation on various committees, I'd like to do that now. And as I mentioned earlier, the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission had its first meeting on July 2nd. That was an organizational meeting. The first business meeting will take place on what is it, the 17th, I guess, next Thursday. And that has been set up to follow the HRPDC and HRTPO meetings, so it'll be that third Thursday of every month that the new Accountability Commission will meet. And that's the commission that's been set up by the General Assembly to essentially spend the money from the transportation bill. And we'll work closely both with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and particularly the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, which is the metropolitan planning organization, which is part of a federal structure for transportation. Paul, I think you had something.
Yes, if I may, just want to share from yesterday's Economic Development Authority meeting. I believe it goes back to last fall. Mr. Mayor, you had originally suggested the idea of possibly considering a gap financing mechanism in order to help businesses bridge those difficulties between getting the necessary capital investment to start a business and encourage their development in the city. And the EDA's response when council and the EDA met together was, while that would be a welcome tool, it might be helpful to have a more diverse array of tools available depending upon the particular needs of a startup business or a new business or relocating business in the city, and not necessarily tie it to one particular aspect of that. And so there was additional conversation in the recent budget. The city adopted an incentive fund for $250,000. The EDA had all throughout the spring been talking about what are some guidelines that they could propose for council's consideration on how such an incentive fund might be administered. They came to agreement and voted on that yesterday, so that will be coming to you with a cover letter from the chair explaining the rationale as to why the guidelines are suggested as they are. And it all boils down to the concept of we want, if possible, or to the best degree possible, an incentive program that will help businesses that otherwise couldn't get over whatever hurdle it is to do business in the city by being able to tap into this incentive program, as opposed to we've got a pot of money and everybody who is opening a business now should just be able to have money by right because they're opening a business. So it's trying to identify those areas of need and apply the available tools in the best possible way to help the businesses, not just businesses that can't make a business plan work, but businesses have a really good chance of success that just need a little bit of help getting over a hurdle in order to make it work. So that'll come to you, I would guess, Ms. DeWitt, in the near term, once Mr. Gilman composes his letter. And I think the Economic Development Authority would be thrilled if council looked at that and said, oh, this is great. We agree wholeheartedly. But being somewhat grounded in reality, I think they also recognize it's a good starting point for conversation.
Terrific. Well, as soon as I get that, I'll disseminate it to council, and we can either put that on the agenda for maybe the August work session or the retreat or something, depending on, Jack, you and I can talk with Michelle a little bit more about the appropriate timing for that. But yeah, we look forward to that. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, it sounds like a positive step. But I can see the difficulty in determining how it's administered, and I guess that was part of the discussion that EDA had.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because there was discussion a while back about a totally unrelated concept, but similar in some ways, that a facade improvement grant program where the city could help businesses that want to invest in the street presence of their particular business, and that's great. And then after doing some research, the EDA discovered that most such programs that have been adopted in other communities have since been abandoned because they found that the majority of the applicants for such grants were people who were going to do the work anyway. And there was just a way to get that, to lower their bill, as opposed to an incentive program that really helps them, motivate them to do work they otherwise might not. So.
Thanks. And any other reports from? Okay. Thanks, Paul. We'll look forward to that, and we'll schedule a discussion of that as we move forward. Next order of business is schedule of meetings. Jack, anything in particular?
I don't see anything in the rest of July to point out in particular.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our final agenda item for today, which is open forum. I have 2 speakers' cards. The first is John Whitley. John, welcome. Why do you have an umbrella?
Okay, so I can get out the door. Mr. Mayor, City Council, Jack and other folk. It's been over a year ago that I came before you to talk about Governor Berkeley Road and some traffic issues. I've been talking with Dan and working with Dan, looking at some issues. He said the best way to do it is to get the Neighborhood Association of Skipwith Farms involved. And when I heard Jack say something about a group washing their hands, well, that group has washed its hands of any involvement whatsoever on Governor Berkeley Road. After all, it's really not a civic association, it's just a group of folk, 4 officers, that represent about 20 families out of almost 200 in Skipwith Farms. So it's more of a wrinkled paper tiger. In discussions with Dan, with Public Utilities, we came to a point that there's no way that the Neighborhood Association will get involved, and frankly, they just, as a statement said, that they don't have the authority. We have talked about such things as stop signs at the corners of Foster Brooks, no, it's Tyler Brooks, and Berkeley. We've talked about, Dan says, hey, you want me to cobble the whole street? I said, no, just cobble right there by where Tyler Brooks comes in. We did end up, though not requested, we did end up with 2 rather large yellow Watch for Children signs that were put up, I think, 3 weeks ago. In conversation and by email with Jack, and I'll be given these are the emails that we have, and you have all these, so I'm not going to belabor it. Jack was saying that he would be checking with stakeholders, he would, and visiting anew the situation. And so I went back out to the neighbors on Monday and spoke with neighbors about these issues. I met individuals with 7 families on Governor Berkeley Road, and all, with the exception of a family at 100 Governor Berkeley Road, saw that there were traffic safety issues. That family did not even know there were vehicles on Governor Berkeley Road. They really did. Most of the folks said that they had in some way tried to get the city to intervene to deal with these issues. 2 families that were not home had their neighbors, they confirmed that they also had issues. Now, I had shared with you that very recently, in the last 4 years, 5 years, that Governor Berkeley Road has changed its demographics. There are 5 young families with children. The other day, I was watching a father right across the street from me, Mike Johnson, as his child was riding his tricycle down to where he was, turned around and ride it back up to where his wife was. That was a really cool thing. Well, Mike got distracted just for a second, and the child was coming down, and here comes one of these cars. Now, I don't have radar built in, but you can get a pretty good idea. It was hauling, and had not Mike turned around to catch his son, who knows what might have happened. I've come to the point that know that you just don't want just one family's car hit, just one pet injured, just one adult injured, just one child injured, just one pet killed, just one adult killed, just one child killed. And I'm asking you that you got to do something. I have followed the routing. I have gone to the folk that there needs to be some really serious interventions on Governor Berkeley Road. And I'm handing, so that they can be disseminated to you, this, it just says, just one, and also corrected the emails again. Thank you.
Thank you. John, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker's card I have is Gary Shelley. Gary, welcome.
Thank you.
As you all know, I'm Gary Shelley. I live at 205 Indian Springs. As you all know, I've spoken about the 110 Harrison Avenue scandal many times over the past few years, and I've been stonewalled after every appearance. But today I'm not here to speak about 110 Harrison. I would like to first acknowledge that I recently received a letter from Ms. Shelton regarding the 110 Harrison Avenue affair, and I want to thank her for her efforts. And I'll respond to that letter at a later date. In many appearances here, I've stated how we, as citizens, are appreciative of our councilmen for the service that you provide. We understand that you sometimes make mistakes, but we nevertheless at all times demand of you honesty, transparency, responsiveness, and accountability. In each of the past two council sessions, I have implored this council to select someone other than you, Mayor, to be the town's mayor for the next 2 years. To no one's surprise, your fellow councilman have once again selected you. Council has defined itself very well. You have developed a culture here where you don't hold yourself, your colleagues, or our staff accountable for their actions. 2 months ago, a young woman stepped forward here in open forum, Carrie Flanagan. She identified herself as a student and as a renter. I guess that immediately disqualified her from having her concerns taken seriously by you. She spoke of multiple unwarranted intrusions on her property by city staff. She spoke of a particularly troubling incident when she discovered a stranger in her backyard taking pictures of her windows. She told you that as a single woman living alone, it was especially unsettling. She said that she confronted the picture taker, who quickly identified himself as a city codes compliance officer and then who scuttled away. She was so upset, she called the police. I had the great fortune to be Miss Flanagan's landlord for 8 years. Miss Flanagan was a model tenant, neighbor, and respected member of the community. Just ask the parents of the triplets that she helped take care of. If you once again demonstrated to her that you have no concern for troubling incidents caused by your staff, you offered her only this insincere response, and Mayor, I'm going to quote you. I regret your unfortunate experiences, and it is something that we work very hard to, and have worked very hard for a long time, to make sure that every citizen of the city feels like they are a full citizen of the city and fully respected by the community and the city. Oh, really? Your actions speak far louder than your words. In February, one of your supporters, Charles Rittinger, spoke in open forum and complained that some college students had a party in his neighborhood. You didn't tell him that you regret his unfortunate experience. You didn't tell him that you wanted him to feel like he's an equal to others in the community. No, you took immediate action. You assured him that the Neighborhood Relations Committee would be informed. You assured him that the Williamsburg City Police would look into the matter, and you promised that you would get back to him. You gave no such assurances and promises to Ms. Flanagan. At the conclusion of your disingenuous response to her, you called for the next speaker. And Mayor, how many times have I seen you turn instinctively to your colleagues seated here and ask them to comment when you feel they might have insight into a matter that could be helpful to the conversation? But after Ms. Flanagan's appearance, you followed your other instinct, which is to turn and run from responsibility. Holding yourself or your staff accountable is something you simply don't do. What happened to Ms. Flanagan was an outrage. It was an outrageous intrusion by the government onto her private property. Her legitimate concerns cry out for legitimate questions. You didn't ask them. I will. And I presume they could best be answered by Ms. Shelton. 1, was Ms. Shelton aware of this incident? 2, was Ms. Shelton aware that Ms. Flanagan filed a complaint to the police. 3, this is important, is there a policy concerning where an inspector can walk on private property? 4, if so, what is that policy? 5, did the inspector follow that policy? 6, did the inspector have instructions from a superior to enter the property? 7, if so, who was that superior? 8, was this the only instance of which you are aware that an inspector has trespassed on private property? Or are there other instances? If so, how many? When? Where? Why? 9, what city employees or officials were later made aware of this incident? 10, why did no one from the city call Ms. Flanagan to apologize? 11, why was the property owner not notified by the city? These are questions that could have been asked, should have been asked. Some concern should have been shown to Ms. Flanagan. They weren't. It would seem that responsibility and accountability are anathema to you. The buck doesn't stop anywhere near you. So, how are you going to handle the citizen's complaint? Will you turn now and ask Ms. Sheldon to comment? Or will you once again run and hide? Thank you.
May I ask Mr. Shelley a question?
Yes.
Mr. Shelley, just to help understand a little bit, approximate date of the issue that Ms.
Yes,
Flanagan?
approximately 2 summers ago.
So, of 12?
Correct.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Certainly.
Anyone else wish to speak to the city on any matter? If not, I believe we have some issues for closed session.
We do. Mr. Mayor, I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing 3 personnel matters per subparagraph 1 concerning 2 staff annual evaluations and board appointments, and 1 item pursuant to Code of Virginia Section 2.2-3705-.6, Section 3 regarding a confidential sales prospectus provided to the city pursuant a confidentiality agreement which affects city business, trade, and tourism development.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please? Ms. Walton?
Aye.
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 We'll take a 5-minute break and come back into closed session.